I'm going to call the Village Board and Plan Commission meeting to order. It is Wednesday, July 12th at 6 p.m. We're at the Village of Vernon Village Hall. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, gentlemen. Brad, would you mind doing a roll call in open meeting compliance? And I am here, Brad.
As President Shu said, she's here for Plan Commission and Village Board. Trustee Finch. Here. Trustee Sawney is excused absence. Trustee Newman is not here. Trustee Millies. Here. We'll go to Plan Commission. Commissioner Nowak.
Here.
Commissioner Rinaldi.
Here.
Commissioner Alex.
Here.
This meeting was noticed and posted according to law.
And I'll just note for the record that our planning and zoning administrator, Sean Malarkey, is here, and Vince Budiak, our building inspector. And I just wanted everyone to know that the public hearing for Dean and Tracy Pavlich is going to be rescheduled. They can't make the hearing, so Brad is going to work with the property owner and reschedule. I don't know if it's going to be next month or September, but Brad's going to handle that, right, Brad? Yes. So what we're going to do then is jump right into item number 5, and Sean and Vince. Vince, you want to come up on the little table here so we can hear your comments? And first of all, you gentlemen did a great job as far as, I mean, all the research and information you got for other communities was great. But I'll be quiet now and let you gentlemen take over.
Thank you. I guess I'll kick it off. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible here. We were asked to take a look at wetland standards and provide some examples. Vince brought to our attention. Mr. Alex has brought to our attention in the past about, potentially being a little too strict with wetland standards and having some leeway in there. I don't disagree. So I, did a little bit of research and came back with some information. Essentially, the baseline for wetland standards are the DNR's protective standards as it applies to Chapter NR 151. They're runoff standards for stormwater management. And that's essentially anytime stormwater management is triggered, and that's for larger projects, more impervious area, those standards apply. And so those standards are written into Waukesha County's stormwater ordinance. Anytime we have anything that goes to their review, they use those standards to look at wetlands, and it's essentially 75 feet back from highly susceptible wetlands, average width, or 10% of the average width for less susceptible wetlands, and then the default is 50 foot for wetlands. So that 75-foot setback is really what the county has used as its default in the zoning ordinance. That's what we've used in our zoning ordinance for a setback, a 75-foot setback for structures. It's probably more than is needed. In Vernon's case, we have the 75-foot setback for all structures. We have exceptions for retaining walls, stairways, and then decks and patios that are immediately adjacent to the principal building. The county has additional exceptions that allows you to average your wetland standards. So if there's a pattern of development that's already closer to the wetland, you can average it out to be a little bit closer. We looked at a bunch of other communities in Waukesha County for those that actually had wetland setback standards. Many communities don't have in their zoning ordinance wetland setback standards and just defers to the DNR standards when you look at stormwater management. So for small projects, for a shed, someone wants to build a shed and it doesn't trigger stormwater regulations, there is no wetland setback. It basically can be up to the wetland where wetland standards don't apply. The DNR standards also has exceptions for such things where even if wetland standards are triggered through stormwater, as long as there's some way for the water to infiltrate and there's best management practice for the stormwater, can't get to the wetland, then those standards no longer apply. You don't have to meet the 75-foot setback and so on, I guess. So the bottom line is that most communities that have these standards in the zoning, it's somewhere between 10 to 20 feet for their zoning for buildings or impervious areas. Unless stormwater management is triggered, then the DNR standards always apply, right? So for smaller projects, it's about 10 to 20 feet. I guess what I'm recommending after talking to the village engineer and some others at Full State, I talked to Stacy, who's an expert at wetlands and stormwater management. They recommended that the village consider something like a 20-foot setback from wetlands that says no impervious, no buildings and no impervious within 20 feet of a delineated wetland. You can do construction and grading. You can do grading and so on within that 20 foot as long as you don't go into the wetland. And essentially that's it. They feel that 20 foot where stormwater is not triggered, if it's a small enough impervious area that you're adding, that 20 foot of grassed area or whatever it is enough to handle any infiltration for a small structure. So again, the DNR standards and the county standards apply when stormwater management comes, but I guess what I'm recommending is a 20-foot wetland setback when stormwater isn't triggered. Vince, do you have anything to add or any comments on that? And I'm sorry, Vince. And obviously, any comments that you have, we're not wed to this. If you think it should be stricter or less strict, we're obviously open to that. Vince?
I think it's just the 20-foot rule comes into play in a couple different aspects. It's kind of meets. It's a little bit more restrictive than some of them. I think the village of McWanago is more restrictive. There's a couple other villages that are less restrictive. But But yet the 20-foot offset gives us enough impervious surface, like you said, or we won't typically have a
And
problem.
you don't have to worry about it. I think you mentioned Big Bend is only 10 feet. It can even be down, I think down as low as 5 feet if the plan commission approves it and the village engineer and building inspector says, okay. I think the 20 feet allows us to not have to worry about it so much. Someone wants to build a 20 by 20 detached garage, there's at least 20 feet of grass or vegetative buffer between that and the wetland. I think it's not, we don't have to think about it so much.
Right.
Planning Commission or
Thoughts?
board members, any comments?
When I always think of wetlands, it's usually, I bet 90% of the wetlands is within the floodplains. There's not that much of it outside of floodplains is what, affect. And with it being outside of the floodplain, usually these water levels are not changing within the wetland. It's pretty much this area, and it stays consistent over the years. I'm in favor of doing down to 10 foot, lesser. And I like the way McQuanago worded it, where you can go down to 5 feet based on plan commission and village engineer and building inspector if it's needed.
Commissioner Nowak?
Sean, what were the restrictions in that 20 feet again? Is that,
The 20 feet you're allowed to grade and do what you need to do, but you can't disturb the wetland, obviously. So your final impervious surface area has got to be outside that 20 feet, but you're allowed to, let's say you put a garage and you do some grading in there, for instance, that would be allowed, is what we're recommending, but you just can't go in. You have to put your, erosion control fence up. You can't go into the wetland. So you could move dirt in the 20 feet, but your impervious area can't end up in the 20 feet.
We would still look at grade changes and erosion control, just to make sure we didn't have any extreme changes in that grade that would,
Yeah,
negative impact C1.
right.
And
And
that's what we do now.
And again, I just want to reiterate, if it's a big enough project, enough impervious area, county stormwater's triggered, and then they handle the review of it. And if there's stormwater management between the impervious area and the wetland, they can go closer than that 75 feet or 50 feet, whatever it is, if it's treated. But then our 20 feet or whatever, or 10 feet or whatever it ends up being would be the ultimate limit on that.
Is it most of the time, it's more like for decks and stuff going on in the back of the house?
That too, yeah,
Decks, detached accessory structures.
Yeah.
yep.
It's not the actual building itself, it's additions.
it
Commissioner
seems,
Rowley?
it seems to me like if you're allowed to grade in that 20 feet, you're not giving it much protection to the wetland, but
Well, the protection is that when it's graded, it'll eventually be grassed, right? You'll seed it
Yeah.
and it'll be grass, and so it'll still work for infiltration through the grass, that 20-foot area over time.
eventually, yeah.
Well, yeah, once it's seeded, as soon as
Yeah.
it's seeded, it'll be.
How stable is the boundary?
Mario, can you talk into your microphone? People want to hear you.
You can see it was there.
The wetland boundary.
Yeah, how stable is that boundary?
Well,
Because we're talking really long-term here, right? I mean, this is not.
they do move over time. I mean, the point that was made is that if it's in a floodplain and the sort of the edge of the floodplain is established based on based on contours of the land, maybe it's not going anywhere. But wetlands do move over time, depending. I mean, the boundary does change a little bit. They grow and they shrink, so it could potentially change over time. So the wetland could get closer or further.
So it could move 5 feet in 50 years?
It could, and that's one of the reasons why 20 feet, maybe what we're recommending
If the
again.
drain tiles plug up and the water starts accumulating, then it gets bigger.
Yeah, they're not permanent. It really depends on what the contours of the land look like. If it's a flat area, if you're looking at a flat area and a wetland is somewhere in that flat area, it's going to move around a little bit. If it's sloped and it's up against the slope, well then it takes a lot for it to move up it.
We've created wetlands because the county actually, a lot of our retention ponds now are wetlands. So, you got a retention pond that's not a wetland, and then we have a development around it, then all of a sudden it created a wetland.
Right.
And then you have to deal with offset setbacks on a
Right.
pre-established lot that, it's gonna be affected.
And that wetland wouldn't meet the DNR standards for a highly susceptible wetland or a susceptible wetland, but it would meet whatever we pick for a definition for setbacks. And right now it's 75 feet.
And that also, to answer your question, Mario, it does change over time with the big wetland areas or like the floodplain lines will change. Like I know on our property, FEMA is redoing those lines. But then also the difference in here, if you notice, sometimes it talks about floodplains versus designated wetlands, meaning you have a wetland delineation done that kind of, for lack of a better word, uncovers wetlands on your property because this type of tree is growing there, this type of vegetation, this type of minnow is there. Those types of things where an overhead map, you would look at it and it wouldn't be, well, that's not a river or stream or navigable waterway. Well, it has all the vegetation that makes it a wetland. And like Vince was saying, we create these wetlands, I think about 10, 15 years ago with the last housing bubble, they had a bunch of agricultural land that was just temporarily kind of graded out because they were expecting to have subdivisions. And it created wetlands on those properties just for moving soil. And then it sat there for 5 years because nobody was building anything. So state statute had to be changed to say, hey, is that a wetland? Is it kind of a man-made kind of wetland type of thing? And I think there are carve-outs in these. But getting back to the original kind of topic of, I think something in the 20 or 10 or 15, if Muskego, to be honest, I like the way that Muskego kind of worded theirs. As far as what would be allowed, one question that I have, what do we use to trigger requiring a wetland delineation and the scale at which it has? I mean, if we have a 10-acre parcel and they're going to put a shed on it, at what point does that trigger kind of?
The way I look at it, and Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, or you look at it differently. If I can look at a map and based on the topography and the way the aerial photograph looks, if it's steep enough and it looks like it clearly butts up against something, the vegetation is clear, I have a pretty good idea where the wetland boundary is. But if it's a flat area and the aerial photography is a little mushy, it's not clear when you look at it, then if they're going to be anywhere close to it, let's say our demarcation was 20 feet. If they're going to be within, say, 25 feet of it, I would say that, and you can't really tell by looking at an aerial photograph, that would require a delineation. So if it's anywhere close and it's in the photograph is hard to read, then yeah, it's probably a delineation.
Yeah, that's typically how we evaluate it. When we're looking at the C1.
Yeah, if I'm at all, if I'm all not sure, then it's going to be delineation.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I like, I think Jeff brought it up regarding some type of language in there as far as a waiver or type of ability for, hey, we have this standard. If there is a one-off circumstance where, oh, there's a jut out of a wetland where all of a sudden now your lot's not buildable, but, well, it's because the one corner of your principal structure is going to be closest to the closest point of that wetland. That might be an extenuating circumstance to give the flexibility to say, do we want to make this, not buildable, or do we want to not allow this development to happen because of this, strict reading of 20 feet or 15 feet or whatever it would end up being, because of those two things that kind of coincided together, where we could look at it and say, the goal of what we're doing is protecting the wetlands, and we're able to do that if it's done correctly and smartly.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael, are you suggesting the Plan Commission, like do a waiver instead of a Board of Appeal? That's what I'm assuming you're saying, is have them come before the commission and look at their proposal?
Yeah, similar to a lot of the waivers that we have when we're able to allow for, CSMs to not have to delineate a whole lot
Yes.
for wetlands, or the accessory building. I know that's one that comes up a lot. So similar to that, kind of giving the autonomy to the Plan Commission to make that call.
Would you agree, Vincent, Sean?
And with maybe input from the village engineer if needed.
Of course,
Oh, God, yeah.
of course.
Yeah, I think that's G and McQuanago's, where they have that worded out in a paragraph.
Yeah, I do like McGuanago's example as well. I think that's a theirs is 15 feet, whether we use that or 20 feet. Is it-
10-foot McQuanago is.
I'm sorry, Muskego. I was referring to Muskego. I like Muskego's better. Muskego's essentially says was the one that allowed the grading within the protective area. Any DNR restrictions would still apply, and then anything 15 feet and beyond was no impervious surface. But again, we're open to suggestions. If you like 10 feet better or 15 feet better, whatever it is. I don't have a problem with the waiver either, is if
Right.
we want to, on a case-by-case basis, the ability to grant a waiver where we can prove there'd be no impact to the wetland with input from the village engineer.
Vince, how often do you see that, or does your company see that in Muskego? Does that happen quite a bit where they go to the plan commission for
Yeah,
that
we
waiver?
had, I say over the last 3 or 4 years, there are probably 5 or 6 people that did come. So it is something that we utilize.
And I think the county does that as well. I think we just had that one last time where they said they didn't have to do any stormwater management plan, like you mentioned, Sean, because they showed how it's, being able to be filtered out, even though they went over that half-acre impervious. And I think that gives us the ability to kind of make that same type of call that the county already does.
Oh, for the one that was on Skyline, Mike?
Yeah, when they
Yeah,
put
that-
up
They
that
found that
larger
the,
building.
they found that the stormwater wouldn't leave their property regardless. so
Right.
there's-
I like that also. Do you gentlemen like it? So do you, Sean and Vince, do you want them to kind of go through which,
I think we got to come to consensus in terms of what the number should be without the waiver.
Jeff, you said 10.
I like that.
Dan, did you say 20?
I like the 20, yeah.
Mario?
I think my-
15.
15? Mike? Mike?
I
Compromise.
have
Put it on a
to,
piece of paper.
Yeah, you're right.
my side yard setback is 20 feet.
Yeah, for the building from the,
Yeah, we're not protecting anything on the lot line. But if we need some protection, I think we need that 20 feet. But
Mike?
Mine would be the 15 with the caveat of the waiver option. I think the waiver thing is, to me, the biggest,
Did everybody agree on that waiver consensus? Okay, I'm sorry, Michael, I cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, that was it.
Gary, you have any feelings?
No, it seems like a nice compromise between 10 and 20 to make it
Little
15. So
Yeah.
I like 15, then you can have the waiver. The waiver makes a lot of sense
Right,
to
that
me.
provision, because there's got to, we're going to run into that. No matter what ordinance, guideline, administrative rule, there's always
The
some.
only thing I'm going to caution is that if it's available, you're going to get these waivers to come in. I mean, the plan commission is going to be reviewing wetland setback waivers if you allow people to do that, so.
And if you start it, I don't know how you can say no to somebody else.
Well, you don't even need to say, if they can prove that there's going to be no impact to the wetland and the village engineer concurs, then maybe it doesn't matter, but people are going to be asking for the waivers. It's
In my
just- it's bound to
opinion,
happen.
we're giving a substantial amount of relief from our 75-foot setback
Without the waiver.
without the waiver. I don't think we're gonna have a lot of people asking for a waiver modification.
Okay.
But it's nice to have it in there, in case there, like Michael said, if there's some extenuating circumstances that come up, at least you guys can take a look at it and make a determination.
Right,
So if we say go with the 15, do we make the waiver half the distance of what the setback is?
Leave it open-ended, maybe, I don't know if we have to pick a minimum. Well, it can be zero. A lot of communities have zero. I mean, City of Waukesha is zero, for instance. If the stormwater management's not triggered, there's no
Because
required.
I'm fine with not putting a number in there, I just didn't know if we had to or not,
Yeah, you can, but you don't
Well,
have to.
Don't have to, we're better probably, and let's go more on a case-by-case basis and see what's,
do you put language in there that it's on the petitioner to prove that
Yeah, the way Muskego, or not Muskego, but
McGuanago?
McGuanago has is basically proof, or I think Big Bend is the same way. That allows the reduction as long as it's
What is,
proven.
what is Big Ben? I couldn't.
10.
10. Because they had that big house right on top of the mill pond. Did you see that? Well, you probably issued the.
Yeah, I did see
I mean, it's right on the pond.
it's not that close.
It looks close to me.
Lions Club's good.
So it
Yeah.
sounds like, I'm hearing 15 with the waiver.
Right. I think that's consensus. Sorry, Dan.
I think it's a good.
5 feet's not that much,
Either way.
from 10 to 15, yeah. 10 feet's twice as much.
So then, Sean, do you write?
Yeah, we would draft some language here, and the question is, do you want to bring it straight to public hearing, or do you want to review it once before?
I think we go straight to public hearing. Go right in there. Because maybe we'll get comments at the public hearing that we say, hey, we never thought of this.
Can always
and we
amend
can-
it, yeah.
Right, yeah, I would, I just don't want to waste time. Not that this is a waste of time, we had great comments.
And I'm not sure there's anything pending that, well, there is something pending that would benefit from this, I guess, so. There's one thing, that expansion, the house addition we've been talking about,
Oh, Garrett?
the McGolan one,
Oh, McGowan, yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, we had a couple pending even with the last zoning amendment, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to happen. I mean, if it's advantageous to the property owner,
Right.
they'll wait.
Sure,
I mean,
okay. So then we'd be looking for July hearing, or do you
July.
want to push it, I'm sorry, August. It was-
Yeah, Brad, you can't do July. Brad, would you have to,
That's tonight, yeah, let's do it tonight, yeah.
Brad, you have time to draft that notice?
Thing's done.
It's a class 2, but
Okay,
I have to have it done by the time it gets posted, so that shouldn't be a problem. It's pretty minor.
Like I said, usually we have 2 weeks from today, so basically 10 days.
Okay.
yeah, I'd like to, you gentlemen agree we'd get going on it?
Yeah.
Okay, sound good?
Understood, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, were you here for the public hearing on the accessory building? They couldn't make it, so, I mean, you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but I think they're gonna come next meeting. But you're welcome to stay. This is exciting information.
Since we're having a public hearing on this, are we gonna combine the one we skipped tonight, so it's all one public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, we're potentially have 3 public hearings, or no, 2 public hearings a night, but there'll be 7.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, but are we,
The accessory structure.
right, and we're not in a position for comprehensive land use plan amendments yet? Not August? Or do you think August?
For which one?
Comp plan?
Well, did we change it to September for the Big Bend area? Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to, get a feeling of what we, got pending. Because Sidell is next plan commission
Like
also,
having
isn't
public
it?
hearings and-
We did
Yeah.
want the plan commission to make the recommendation by resolution before that, though, so we talked about August for that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's,
Probably have another public hearing for accessory structure.
okay. That's good. I mean, that's not too. Alrighty, then, gentlemen, what we're going to do is go to item number 5. This is the resolution for recommendation to the village board on an amendment to the Smart Growth Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Sean, did you want to update the plan commission on any, I know that we talked about that last meeting. Just in case there's any, I mean, I know you're still
On the
drafting.
resolution, so yeah, this is the item on the resolution, so we
don't have the resolution.
there's not a resolution made? Then that'll have to wait till,
So we'll do the resolution next month,
sure,
and then we'll do the public hearing in September.
great.
Sound good, guys? Is that okay, gentlemen? Okay.
Yeah, the point is that the plan commission, we talked to Attorney Macy about it, the state law requires the plan commission to recommend to the village board
Right.
any comp plan changes through resolution.
Right.
And we talked about it conceptually. Everyone was okay with it going forward to public hearing, but he wants it to happen prior to that. And so we'll do that next month for September.
Sounds good. And then, gentlemen, the reason the Hein Newman development, we have new members on the Plan Commission, new members on the board, and there was some confusion when we came to the village board about, the first map that they brought, and then there was some discussion with the village, I'm assuming with President Fortner, and then there was another map sent over. So just so everybody's on board, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood what the developers proposed initially, and then what it looks like now. Brad was in the process of having quite a few discussions with the developer, but I asked Brad to hold off because if it's not the consensus of the Plan Commission and the board, because it is a unique, it's not the normal village-type development. This is way out of our perspective, but because of the uniqueness of half village, half town. I mean, it's, and I wanted to tell the Plan Commission too, I think I did at the last meeting, in the town of McGuanago, right next to the Elegant Farmer, it's not the Newman development, but that development is a town-village McGuanago development, and you can't tell the difference between the village and the town because they're all small lots with sewer and water. But the property owners can tell because their tax rate at the town is a lot less than the village. But I'll be quiet and let Sean jump in right now.
You can't match tax rates for those areas.
Did we get
No, no, that's the only difference, but, but it's a very nice development.
just that original?
I guess, let me just say, Brad, maybe you can take it, but I just want to say a couple things about it. So there's been,
Sure what she's talking about.
the last time we reviewed this at the Plan Commission was back in April of last year. I have 5 different concepts here that I've seen in the property since we started talking about this. The one that the Plan Commission reviewed at that time was different than the current one that's floating around right now. At the time, last time the Plan Commission took a look at the concept, it had,
Sean, can you put any of those maps up so the audience can see?
I don't have it electronically right now.
Okay.
Should have been in the packets.
Okay, do you want to just plug in?
Do you have the packet up?
I don't.
I don't either.
Essentially, what was proposed the last time the Plan Commission saw this was 25 single-family lots in the village of McGuanago on about 11 acres, and then 12 single-family lots in the village of Vernon on about 15 acres. Lots in Vernon would have ranged from 30,000 square feet to 51,000 square feet. There was also parcel to the west and a parcel to the north, and we talked about different connections, but since that occurred, the developer has been working on other updates. They've been talking with the village of Maguanago on this. What the current concept shows essentially is 36 units in the village of Maguanago, 58 units in the village of Vernon. The ones in Vernon, the 58 units on Vernon are on about 34 acres after they've adjusted the boundary, because the boundary in that area is a little screwy based on an old cul-de-sac that was to be platted
Just a lead.
at some point. So what that really amounts to is essentially 25,000, give or take, square feet of gross land per unit. So our comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan right now has it as recreational because there was a driving range and a golf course there. They'd have to amend the comprehensive plan to what's called our low-density residential, which does fit within this range. We allow 20,000 square feet to 1.5 acres per unit, so that 25,000 would be the very high density side of that, but it would be potentially allowed. Yeah, there's the
Trying to get it smaller, trying to get it fit in.
concept there.
Oops, sorry. This is the latest one, right, Sean?
Yeah, the red line, the dark red line that you see that goes sort of east and west across it would be the adjusted boundary between the two villages. Everything north. So north of it, again, 58 units in Vernon, 36 units in Maguanago. There's a mix of very small units and larger units in Vernon. We don't have a zoning district right now that would allow lots this small. The R3 zoning district is our most dense zoning district that allows lots at 20,000 square feet and 120 feet wide. But these lots are as small as 9,000 plus square feet up to 20,000 square feet. So in order to allow this to happen, we need the comp plan change. We would also need to amend our zoning ordinance to allow lots in, say, R3. We could amend the R3 zoning district to allow smaller lots if they're sewered, right? So if they're unsewered, they're 20,000 square feet. If they're sewered, we could go small as we wanted to as that. The other option is a PUD. However, the PUD requires 40% set aside for open space. And there's no calculations here, but I'm fairly confident that 40% of the development isn't set aside for open space. So the only way to do this would be to either create a new zoning district or to amend R3 to go smaller. So I haven't been part of the discussions lately. I know Brad has been talking to the administrator in the village of Maguanago. in terms of coordination. This would be obviously a highly coordinated effort in terms of approvals and then development agreements and long-term maintenance of the roads and so on. So Brad, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in terms of recent developments?
The only thing that I have to add is that, as President Chu said, that, this, the previous board and planning commission have been working on this, and that's where discussions kind of started with me and the administrator from the village of McGuanago, kind of right after the first of the year, and then with, the changes to the board, it was kind of, drug our feet a little bit till we got the new board cell, knowing that there was going to be 3 new members to the board. And, we had a vacancy on plan commission. And so that's where it's got. The village board talked about this back in last month in closed session. And, the consensus from that meeting was more to bring it to the plan commission so they could hear some feedback. Specifically on the density, the village board's been talking about some other topics regarding this development that pertain to, an agreement between McGuanago and the village. But, for the, I think the big question the board's looking at, or feedback the board's looking at is, the current proposed density that's in front of you guys.
Right, because it's not the norm. Gary?
Well, it sounds like when it first came to you, it came for 30,000 to 51,000 feet, which is probably a normal lot for
Vernon.
Vernon. So they brought that to begin with.
They
Then they
did
brought the new idea then later?
not to the plan. So the new idea they've been developing, but this newest idea hasn't been to the plan commission yet. I think part of the reason is that the economics of the layout, the fact that they can't get septic systems in a lot of these areas, and so they have to do sewer. If they're going to do sewer, they might as well make the lot small enough to be economically feasible to pay for the sewer in order to work. So this is their concept based on the economic realities of the site and the fact that they have to provide sewer to a lot of these lots, otherwise they can't develop them. So
And Sean, it's sewer and water, right?
it's sewer and water, but sewer is the
the
determining
biggie,
factor.
yes, yeah.
That's the determining factor in terms of what you can and can't get. So this is what they're saying they need to. We haven't pushed them yet because we haven't really talked to them. I haven't talked to them in a while in terms of, well, could you take out some of these lots, make out a few of these lots bigger? Maybe that's possible. We just haven't had a chance to explore that with them yet in terms of density.
Yeah, this is not set in stone, but this is the last proposal, I'm assuming the village saw, Brad?
Yes, from my understanding, this last rendition, McGuanago's seen, I don't think Tim O'Brien or Newman has done a whole lot with this in the last 12 months just because they've been busy with other stuff and then the economic drivers of this. But they have indicated to us that this project is still, something they'd like to see go, even though, the economic drivers aren't maybe there anymore. There's a lot of apprehension in the market.
Yeah, and so for those of you that weren't here at the beginning of the discussions of this, the whole reason or the impetus is that the boundary in this area between the two villages is a little wonky, right? It needs to be cleaned up, and development around it is tough. This area is kind of isolated from the rest of the village of Vernon. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a part of McGuanago, but it's tied closer to McGuanago in terms of proximity and visibility than it is to the rest of Vernon. And so the idea was that the developer thought as well, be a good way to solve a lot of problems in terms of the boundary and provide a great development. And it's close to McGuanago. It's a good tax base for Vernon. And so they're looking for a win-win solution here. In terms of a more unique development pattern. But if the village doesn't, Vernon doesn't think that the density works, you don't want to set a precedent in Vernon, for instance, of this type of a thing, that's obviously open to discussion.
And I know the village of McGuanago does not want to, and nor has, I haven't spoken to Carl, but I did in the past, and no board member had any interest in extending sewer water any further than this development, as far as this board and plan commission. As Sean stated, this was unique, but like I said, this map was never shown to the board or the village, so we kind of wanted, not that you're set in stone, but wanted you to see what they show Brad and Sean now and get your feelings, not that you're approving anything tonight, but if you don't like this concept at all, we kind of need to know to tell the developer and to tell McGuanago that it's,
Well, we've got things like, they want to put sidewalks in, correct?
Yes.
That's up for, certainly McGuanago is going to require sidewalks. They would like it to be coordinated through both sides, but if Vernon feels differently, then
Yeah, just stop the sidewalk.
we, or maybe it's only on certain roads. I don't know.
Certain sides of the street.
Certain
I mean,
sides.
those details will be, can be hammered out as we go through the process. I think, the big question that's going to impact this, this development, and the feedback that you guys have to provide staff and, I think President she'll be part of these conversations is, is the current proposed density something that you guys are open to, at this point? And if the, current proposed density of, it's probably averages out to what, 13,000 square feet per lot, Sean? Maybe off the.
Yeah, I'm guessing, but that sounds right, yeah.
If that's something that the Plan Commission, Village Board aren't open to, then it's going back to the developer and saying, hey, we want to see something that increases that, that number of, square footage for the lots, and then that's going to drive the developer's ambition as to whether they want to move forward on this project or what it does, because with sewer and water, the expense to put in sewer and water is very expensive at over $1 million a mile. And so that's where the density plays into this to recoup those costs there. And as President Chu said, I don't think, from my staff perspective is that I don't think there's a burning desire or any desire from our residents or any of these boards to extend sewer and water past the, what's proposed here. And I also think, for our residents' sake, there's a lot of, geographical limitations to running sewer and water further due to the cost for a developer, and there's just not vacant land in the area that's prime for development that would benefit from sewer and water. So I don't think, expansion beyond sewer and water beyond this development, if that's what would occur, is, feasible, at least on that, side of town as we're talking.
Brad, how far would the sewer run on that map there? That-
It would just be in the development. It would be fed from, I think it's called Cardinal Lane there, in this direction, here. The preliminary conversations we've had with McGuanago is that when you have a water utility and water service, you want to have a loop system so that you get a water main break. You're not impacting an entire subdivision or large area where people don't have water. So just been some preliminary conversations about would there be a way to loop the system so that if there's a water main break on the main feed, it can be reverse fed, which is common practice for stuff. But in terms of service, Cardinal Lane, that Red Fox Run, I think maybe another area. And then the question's been is, do you just run a loop up National Avenue to create a secondary loop for a feed?
So all the lots in Vernon would be sewered? Is that?
Yep.
And, yeah, sewer and water.
And the preliminary conversations, and I think the direction that staff is recommending to the board at this point, if this is what would be, if to provide sewer and water there would be, is to have McGuanago be the owner and operator of all of the sewer and water there, and they would be customers of McGuanago. The only impact or any assistance the Village of Vernon would provide, or responsibilities the Village of Vernon would have regarding sewer and water would be to put delinquent charges on their tax bill. So sewer and water traditionally is not a burden on taxpayers. Certain places it can be, neighboring community, but the sewer and water is supposed to support itself and not be a burden on the taxpayers in the way this would be set up. And I think the size of McGuanago, and it being owned by McGuanago takes any burden off our taxpayers or any risk off our taxpayers of having that burden in the future, except for the people that are partaking in that or those homes in that subdivision.
Sean, what's that red blob in the middle?
That's some, I think it's been clicked on. That's essentially an area that would go from McGuanago to Vernon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And as Sean said, there's some areas here where, lost the term, but we would be transferring property or territory with McGuanago, and we'd come out, I think, in that winter in about
That
half a
blue,
year.
that blue area is what goes to McGuanago. The red area is what goes to
Vernon.
Vernon. We come out a little bit ahead.
Can I ask one question? So it's kind of a joint development between the Village of Vernon and the Village of Waquanago, correct? And are we consistent, so are we reducing the offsets and setback requirements in our portion to be equivalent to those lots?
Don't know. No matter what, the zoning ordinance has to be amended, so we'd have to look at that at that time.
If it was a PUD, then we could do it through the PUD.
We could, but the PUD requires 40% open space.
And there's not enough land that would be left in open space for that delineation?
Right, right.
Okay.
But eventually, if this would go through, it would basically mirror the development in Waquanago.
That's what McGuanago would like to happen. It's up to Vernon as to whether or not
They did say that was negotiable,
But it should, I mean, it looks like a one single development. So,
Right.
I mean, it makes sense to have some consistency between the two.
Mario, you had a question. I'm sorry, Brad.
These lots in the 80s, approaching National Avenue, the verbiage suggests that's Vernon, but
is.
they're too small. Is that Big Bend, or, is that McGuanago, or is that?
Well, that's all
It
Vernon.
is Vernon, but it's just, a smaller size lot. that
So
they
the
pro-
minimum, what's with this minimum 15,000 square feet when these are all under?
Those are the pink ones. The estate lots are the 15,000. The villa lots, which are both in McGuanago and Vernon, are the 9,000 minimum.
That's funny. Estate.
Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry, in the villa. I'm sorry. Sorry.
First, a question since we're looking at the map. Where does the street that goes to the north by lots 71 and 70 in those estates? There's no like cul-de-sac or anything?
That would be a temporary cul-de-sac there for future extension to the north. They don't, yeah, it would be temporary. So
Yeah.
you don't see the right-of-way dedicated for a cul-de-sac there because it wouldn't be. It would just be pavement for either a T turnaround or a.
Yeah, and there's been some interest that somebody wants to purchase that property to the north along National Avenue and actually turn it a home site. So that'd be something to talk to Newman about in another rendition is how do you, if that property is developed in that manner, how do we either create a T turnaround or do we look at a cul-de-sac, but then does it meet our cul-de-sac requirements or exceed our cul-de-sac requirement in length?
Right. That we did talk about that originally too, because right now the limit is 1,200 feet
So that'd be another question for it.
is to reduce the cul-de-sac length.
Wasn't there some question on extending that road to the north through the wetland area? Has that been resolved, or that?
My conversations with McGuanago have been one in-person meeting with their administrator, and it was roughly to talk about a lot of the internal questions in terms of sewer, water, things like that, not necessarily, we talked a little bit about roads, but not real in depth, and I think you're talking about the road that comes out by the storage building?
No, the northeast corner.
That northeast
This one
corner
right
there,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, that parcel in the north, there's been conversations about somebody wanting to just purchase that and do split it into like two lots and have two single-family homes on it.
We talked about that though originally, Dan, if you remember. And then
Right.
the idea, there's a wetland across there, and I guess the idea was that it'd be great to get that all the way out to National Avenue. We didn't know at the time, and we still don't know the feasibility of bringing a road through that
Well,
wetland.
at that time, we didn't have a connection even to National right by Midway there, or by
Oh,
the storage buildings.
right.
So-
Oops. Right here. But it's,
I guess the point is that this, with a temporary cul-de-sac, we'd expect that to be developed residentially at some point in the future. Connect to this cul-de-sac. We'll have to determine whether or not the cul-de-sac length is appropriate or it could be
Yep.
amended. But
Yep.
those lots to the north wouldn't get sewer and water though. Those would be larger lots. Those would be
Conform to our-
probably 30,000 square feet if the county is going to approve private
it-
septic
yeah.
system on it.
Vernon Classic.
Vernon Classic.
Would it be,
it's a Vernon Super Estate.
Yeah, super estate, yeah.
would it be easier to limit the extension of the sewer line on that road if we did have a permanent cul-de-sac there?
And not connect up to the north, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and Sean can speak to this, my experience with sewer and water is there, and if you put the cul-de-sac in, I think that's a good way of putting a dead end on it so that it's not going to be extended in the future further, but I think too, feasibility, unless somebody did another development like what's there, but in the conversation, somebody reached out to me about that. It sounds like they'd maybe split into 2 lots and have, I think it's like a 10-acre parcel or something, so it'd be, a Vernon
Well-
Classic, so,
That can be laid out so it can always be split in the future too, but
Yeah, I think when we started to look at it, we thought, well, that area south of the wetland and that northern parcel isn't necessarily developable unless you can get the wetland crossing. And so when you start to look at adjacent properties being planned and developed, you want to look at, to see if properties next to them need a connection from it to develop. And we just thought, hey, it makes sense to put at least a connection there for the future. If you feel strongly against it, we can certainly push. I don't think they care. They wouldn't care if we capped a cul-de-sac there because they have to spend more money here to extend the road further.
And they have no interest.
In
I know
developing
the
that,
village
right.
president has no interest in, providing sewer and water any further than this
Right.
development.
well, those things change though.
Oh, I know,
and,
yes, yeah.
We never wanted sewer anywhere.
Oh, I was on the.
And it's
plan-
happening. So
I was on the plan commission when the person that owned that land at the subdivision say over her dead body, there will never be sewer and water.
Yeah.
And guess what?
Yeah.
And she's still alive.
So I guess I would rather see a cul-de-sac there, but this is a difficult property and with the boundaries and everything and between both communities, I think we should probably be flexible to make sure something happens there.
Yeah, the biggest thing at this, there's a lot of work to do, but if the overall concept is the plan commission and village board said, I don't like it, then we'd kind of need to know that, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of work to be done. But if the concept you don't like at all, because this is something we never deal with in Vernon because it's not our normal type development, but that's why we brought it. Michael, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the overarching things you're kind of talking about is what are we going to do with those boundaries? Are we going to have kind of a buffer zone where you're going from Mukwonago into Vernon? Because like we said, that's not Vernon. Vernon is, septic system and wells and larger lots. So with this being in that kind of buffer zone, I think it does make sense for us to kind of, massage what we currently have to make the development work, knowing that there are limiting factors. If there's no sewer, the economics aren't there to create this type
Right.
of development. So I think that's kind of our saving grace, so to speak. Again, the caveat, like Dan mentioned, well, they used to say that it wouldn't be over the border. Now it is, and is it going to encroach more? But I think that's just kind of the natural, way that you're going to have to see this development, kind of happen. And we have to just decide. I mean, 2 months ago, we were talking about the boundary with Big Bend because other municipalities are going to make decisions and then that impacts Vernon and we have to kind of react. And I think this is a good way to do it.
Gary, any thoughts?
As I look at it more, when you go west, around Edgewood right there, they've got a bunch of smaller lots already, so this kind of fits a little
Right.
bit. So from that standpoint, it fits. I am bothered by the fact that it seems like a compromise is to use the land and stuff like that, to compromise what we've been doing. So I've got some troubleness in my soul a little bit about it, but, I'm open-minded to it, but,
And I think to be perfectly honest, I think there's, I know there's a market for it because a lot of people like the Vernon area, but they don't want to mow the big yard and have the big, what they call estates, I think is kind of cute, the estates in the villas, because, like I said, it's something that we typically don't see and we will never see until, if Vernon ever hits sewer and water, then you're gonna see a whole dynamics of Vernon change, but, that's a long time away.
I probably won't be here.
Me neither. I'm going to Florida. So gentlemen, do you want to, like I said, the developer would have to come back. Brad's got a lot of work. I mean, I'll help Brad in any way I can, but our biggest concept is if you don't like this, and like I said, this is not set in stone. They'd have to go through our approval process, the villages, and there's a lot of work behind the scenes that has to be done. But I wanted Brad to at least be able to tell Fred, Plan commission doesn't like it, the board doesn't like it, or they like it, they, want to keep going on it,
No, I'm fine with the density. I think it's a good development for both McQuonigo and Vernon. And it's just got a lot of details to work out and stuff.
Right.
But I think it's and only precedent we're setting is a small lot side if you have sewer and water, which isn't gonna happen anywhere else in Vernon, so it's not like it's gonna be an issue down the road.
right. Dan?
Well, I think I spoke my piece, but I'd like to see that cul-de-sac on that northeast corner. But a question for Sean, I thought originally on that northwest corner there, like behind that empty field along National, I thought the soils were not good for basements in there.
I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was basements or not. The soils were absolutely not good for septic systems. And so that's the reason for the sewer. I don't remember the basement discussion or not.
I know we have a couple basement things in Hidden Lakes, but those are a lot bigger lots. I think there's 3 of them, isn't there, Vince, that we had to?
Right, we handled that
Basement
through
provisions?
an engineering application, but again, we'd probably do the same thing we've been doing. We'll do a soil evaluation for high seasonal groundwater, that would affect our grading plan, master grading.
Yeah, they're gonna,
Don't forget, right now, I mean, most of our subdivisions, we don't have a master grading plan because they're large lots.
Right.
This particular property is gonna be a lot different, so we're gonna have a master grading plan, we have to abide by it, we do research on putting foundation now, so, I mean, it's something that we'll have to monitor, but yeah, Dan's right, we just take a look at those soil conditions and it's could be part of the review of the whole situation.
One question I have, I think it came up before, where are we at with that developers kind of checklist type of thing? I know there was something in the transition. I think, Mario, you said, well, one of the good things is, hey, put it into practice and kind of flesh it out through that process. And it sounds like right now, staff is saying, hey, we need to kind of know which way to go. I guess my whole point in saying this is, I think we need to work with, people who are coming in inquiring, because they need to know at the early stages, kind of feel out the room to know, is this worth investing the time and effort in going down this road? I think that developers checklist is probably a good tool for them and us. So where is that?
Yeah, the checklist and the developers agreement, that we haven't met on that yet.
And this, I think, is, both President Chu and Planner Malarkey have said, I think from a staff level, it'll be good to kind of use this as a model for a checklist. But at the same time, this development is going to be,
Unique.
there's so many pieces with this one. I don't necessarily know if we want to, I don't want to say set ourselves up for failure, but.
You wouldn't model the model after
No,
this.
I wouldn't.
No.
Right?
But I think it'd be a good learning experience
Yeah.
to see. And we do have, I know we've had a couple, checklists and model developers agreement that we wanted to look at, but we wanted to have, Sean, Vince, Brad, the engineer, a whole group of people there looking at it, and then bring it to Plan Commission, get feedback from the Plan Commission, bring it back to staff. Like I said, maybe we'll try to get something together.
It will be good to, at least at the staff level, we'll get to see what McGuanago does on that. But like President Chu said, if this might be a good opportunity here, we'll have to do something with McGuanago on the development agreement. But we can look at other stuff that's out there and say, hey, we saw this community, we saw that community, and they put this in their development agreement, it might be worth putting in ours.
All right, gentlemen, so we have a consensus that we should proceed. Brad should kind of proceed then. And like I said, this is not, locked in
Right.
stone. It's going to come back. But if the concept was something that you guys did not like, we just kind of need to know.
But I think it's a far better proposal than what we saw in the beginning.
Oh, I do too.
If everything's feasible and works out, I think we should pursue it, but.
And the administrator from McGuanago said he'd come, and we kind of called him off. And, Brad's working with
Yeah.
Fred the administrator. There's Fred the president, Fred the administrator,
So
so.
there's nothing we have to do at this time
Oh,
to
no. Nope.
move this along, or we're
Nope.
kind of waiting on them to
Right.
submit it.
Yeah, they have to come forward and,
Because their goal, the last time I talked with them, their goal is to probably have all approvals within the next 12 months.
Okay.
Quick question, oh, go ahead, Mario.
Mario?
They didn't have all these ponds like the last time we saw this, did they? What's driving?
So I mean, it's
Well-
the stormwater, so I mean, that's gonna be another one of those layers that we have, is that we're part of county stormwater.
And they do their
and
own.
they're their own, so that's another layer of complexity.
Yeah,
development
gotta
that
keep them
we're-
separate.
That we're gonna have, so.
Right.
We'll,
Yeah, because Rupert Milky is totally different than the county.
Right.
No offense, no, I'm not.
So it's being driven by an area requirement?
Possibility, yeah.
I'm not sure what's driving the proposal for the stormwater pond.
I don't think they've even gotten that far to do the calculations for stormwater yet. They probably have just used some estimates. But originally they had ponds that crossed jurisdictions. They had like Big Pond, they crossed both of our jurisdictions. And the point that we made is, well, that's going to be very complicated for maintenance and management and approvals because the county's different than the village. And so then they reorganized it into, these smaller ponds.
Mike?
One of the other things that was brought up at the beginning, Sean, well, first I'll say, I think having a cohesive development, so when you're driving through, you're not seeing, different setbacks. I think Vince brought up a good point with that. And then Sean brought up a good point with, and this is, as you guys continue the talks, we internally should probably start deciding, is this R3 with modifications, or is this some R4 other type of zoning? Because obviously that'll have to happen. And if they're talking a 12-month timeline, we should probably be ready, knowing that this is kind of the direction that they're going. As they're doing their homework, we can do our homework to know, is it worth it for us to reinvent R3 or invent something new?
Right.
And Sean, do you have a preference?
I think on first blush, I would like to not create a new zoning district because then there's going to be redundancies with uses. And so every use that's allowed in R3 will be allowed, in this, it's single family homes. The only difference is lot size and lot width and setbacks. And I think that's most easily accomplished by just writing a carve out in R3 that says if it's sewered, there's a few different standards that you get to follow. And I think that's the simplest way to do it.
Yeah, I like that too.
Do we have a zoning category that would fit these parcels? Or if we have to,
It would be R3 with some tweaks to it. We would use R3, but make some
R3.
changes that allows for sewered lots in R3 to have a little more relaxed standards.
okay.
Does that bring into issue some of the things like the side yard setbacks? And
It does.
Yard setbacks,
It does.
so that might be a little bit more difficult than,
Well,
because otherwise if we say, if it's this carve out, then you fall under these setback requirements?
yes,
then?
if you're sewered in R3, you have this minimum lot size, this minimum lot width, and these minimum setbacks. It's just a subcategory, yeah.
And I think, did Big Ben have that in their code for their stuff? For
We
sewer?
changed that, our setbacks,
For sewered lots?
Right,
Yeah,
for sewered.
yeah.
That'd be the easiest way to
That's
do it.
pretty typical to do it for communities that have both sewered and unsewered. You just have a split.
Okay, gentlemen, are we good?
We're good.
Alrighty, so then we're going to move right along into, I would make a motion to approve the Plan Commission minutes from June 14th, 2023. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by, was that Jeff? Jeff, did you make, Jeff Millies? Is there any discussion on the motion or the minutes?
For the minutes, I would just say, a couple of times I was referenced as, I think, Alex Michael,
Oh,
which wouldn't be the first, won't be the last. I was called Michael Axel recently, and I was like, that might be a good stage name, but other than that,
and do you prefer Michael or Mike? Because you told me,
whatever you guys want to do in here when we're talking Mike is fine.
That's the problem with having two first names,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think I'm going to take that Axel one.
so Brad,
Could
you're
be
going to
worse.
just fix that? Is there any other?
Unless you'd like to remain as that as its alias, we can do that too.
AKA. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Abstain?
Oh,
I
let's
wasn't
see.
here.
Okay, so 1, 2, so we have three to 1. Mario voted aye, Jeff voted aye, I voted aye, and Dan abstained. Michael, you
Four.
voted aye, 4, yeah.
Yeah, 4 to
Which is
0
Plan
with
Commission.
an abstention.
Okay, throwing me out. That's fine.
All right, and now I'd entertain a motion for the Plan Commission to adjourn. Is there a motion to that effect?
I shall so move.
Commissioner Nowak, is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Rinaldi, discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Plan Commission is adjourned. Is there a motion for the village board to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second, Gary?
I will second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All opposed? No, I'm kidding.